Hello, this is Floyd FP. This is my third and final part of my series of why I'm not a Christian. Again, I'm going to emphasize that this is a summary of my reasons. I'm not going into detail and defending each one. Rather, I'm just giving an overview of them, and I will point you or tell you where you can get more information or where I defended them, these reasons more, whether in a presentation or debate or previous hangout or whatever. So with that, we will get started. So let me, oops, increase that. There we go. All right, so again, this is part 3. And the purpose of this is I'm hoping to educate everyone on the reasons why I think Christianity are false, and also to create dialogue, debate, and so forth. If you want to talk to me about these things, whether it be public or private, if you want to do a debate with me or whatever, that's fine. We can talk about that on your channel or my channel, or you just want to have a private discussion with me. Here are ways you can reach me. You can reach me on YouTube, through my channel. You can email me, my email address. I'm on Facebook and also Discord. So you can reach me in those avenues. All right, so let's go on to my next argument. My next argument is Jesus was not the Messiah. What do I mean by that? I mean the Jewish Messiah. What was the expectations of a Jewish Messiah? Well, Messiah means anointed one. It could be an anointed priest or king of Judah or Israel. But there will be it's expected that to be a wise and righteous descendant of David through Solomon, who will rule Israel as king. The world would be changed into a utopia of universal peace and knowledge of the Jewish God, living according to the teachings of his Torah, and be an ideal example for living for all nations. The Jewish people will return to their ancestral homeland after being scattered around the world. The Jewish temple will be rebuilt, and the world will destroy their weapons of war and enter into a new age of eternal peace and knowledge of God. So with that, let's ask ourselves, how many days has Jesus served as a Davidic king? 0. Has there been a Messianic age or any realized eschatology? No. Has the temple been rebuilt? No. Has Jesus gathered all Jews back to the land of Israel? No. Did Jesus usher in an era of world peace and destroy all weapons in the world? No. Well, Christians will say, well, this will happen in the future. Okay, well, if it does happen in the future, okay, we'll evaluate if Jesus is the Messiah then. But until these things happen, he hasn't fulfilled the role. No one questions that Donald Trump is the president. Some people may not like it. Some people might even question if it was if he got there legally or not. But bottom line is he's sitting in the Oval Office and no one else is. So everyone accepts he's the president. No one questions that because where he is and how he's treating. Well, we can't say that about Jesus. So until that happens, how can you call Jesus the Messiah? Now they'll say, well, they're mistaken of what the Messiah should be. There's prophecies about how he would be killed and raised and so forth. Well, if we look at a lot of those prophecies, like Isaiah 7:14, Hosea 11:1, Isaiah 9. The favorite ones apologists love are Psalm 22, Isaiah 53, and Daniel 9. They really don't, in my mind, they're often taken out of context and really don't apply to Jesus. what we've seen, especially in the New Testament, is a lot of these so-called prophecy claims are taken out of context of the original meaning and reinterpreted verses. They practice what's called pesher exegesis, where they find a new esoteric meaning in the Old Testament verses to mean something applied to Jesus. But in the original context, it really doesn't. Most of these things aren't really messianic prophecies at all. But they look for keywords like son, my son, kingdom, that day, and some verses referencing the future, and they would create stories about Jesus in an esoteric manner. For example, Hosea 11:1. Some of the prophecies, like Psalm 22, were individual lament psalms for a reigning king. They're enthronement or birth oracles for former kings and apply to Jesus, like Isaiah 9:6. And they had verses where a person was harmed or persecuted, like in Isaiah 53. And they also use the Greek Septuagint for their prophecies, which sometimes varied from the original Hebrew. So if you want more detail on this, on my YouTube channel, I did do a debate with, who did I do this originally with? I forget his name, Peripheral Prophet. It was on Deeper in Dogma. It's available. It's mirrored on my channel, so you can see that. I go into detail about this. I also have a lengthy presentation. I think it's just like 2 hours long on the Daniel 9 70 weeks prophecy. I know a lot of apologists like to use Daniel 9 as a prophecy about Jesus. So I have a video on that as well on my channel. So if you want more information, I recommend watching those YouTube shows. Here's what I consider a huge defeater in Christianity. This is the failed prophecy of Jesus' second coming. Throughout the New Testament, it is written that Jesus would return in the generation of the New Testament writers. For example, in Matthew 16, we read, there are some standing here who will not taste death before they see the Son of Man coming in his kingdom. In 1 John 2, we read, children, it is the last hour, as you have heard that the Antichrist is coming, and so many Antichrists have come. Therefore, we know it is in the last hour. So there's an apocalyptic expectation throughout the New Testament. And Jesus was supposed to return then. Obviously, it didn't happen. This is a showstopper for me. This is game over as far as Christianity is concerned for me. More verses, James 5. You also be patient, establish your hearts, for the coming of the Lord is at hand. Do not grumble, brethren, against one another, that you may be judged. Behold, the judge is standing at the doors. They're expecting it to happen very soon. Through Revelation, Revelation talks about Jesus coming very soon. These words are trustworthy and true, and the Lord, the God of the spirits and the prophets, have sent his angel to show his servants what must soon take place. And behold, I am coming soon. And he said to me, do not seal up the words of the prophecy of this book, for the time is near. Behold, I am coming soon, bringing my recompense to repay everyone what he has done. He who testifies to these says, surely I am coming soon. Amen. Come, Lord Jesus. So what is the typical response from Christians about these verses? Well, they'll usually appeal to what's called partial preterism, where some of these passages they'll say is applied to the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 CE by the Roman army. And then some of these verses are meant for the future of when Jesus is going to return. So that's usually how they justify it. But if you look at some of these verses, particularly like 1 John, these verses were written specifically for the communities at that time. They weren't written for some, audience in 2,000 years later. They were written directly to these communities and churches. In Revelation, Revelation was written to the 7 churches of Asia, and they say, don't even seal up these words because the time is near. So they expected it was going to happen then. I do a full presentation and debate I had with G-Man on this. I go into details about this. I recommend if you want to look more into this. It's on G-Man's channel. It's mirrored on my channel. So the debate is on my channel. You can check it out. I offer a full presentation on Jesus's failed prophecy of his second coming. And a lot of some apologists and Bible scholars acknowledge what I'm saying. This is not my pet theory here. A lot of apologists and I shouldn't say a lot of apologists, but some apologists and a lot of critical scholars accept that the New Testament writers believed Jesus would return in their lifetime. One example of that is C.S. Lewis. I'll read what C.S. Lewis writes in The World's Last Night. It says, "Say what you like, we shall be told the apocalyptic beliefs of the first Christians have been proved to be false. It is clear from the New Testament that they all expected the second coming in their own lifetime. And worse still, they had a reason, and one which you will find very embarrassing. Their master had told them so. He shared and indeed created their delusion. He said in so many words, this generation should not pass till all these things be done. And he was wrong. He clearly knew no more about the end of the world than anyone else. It is certainly the most embarrassing verse in the Bible. The one expedition of error and the one confession of ignorance grows side by side. The facts then are these: that Jesus professed himself in some sense ignorant, and within a moment showed that he really was so. To believe in the incarnation, to believe that he is God, makes it hard to understand how he could be ignorant, but also makes it certain that if he could be ignorant, then ignorant he could be. For a God who can be ignorant is less baffling than a God who falsely professes ignorance. So that's Lewis's attempt to rationalize this. It makes me think of Deuteronomy 18. What does Deuteronomy 18:20 through 22 says? But the prophet who presumes to speak a word in my name, which I have not commanded him to speak, or who speaks in the name of other gods, that same prophet shall die. And if you say in his heart, how may you know the word which the Lord has spoken? When a prophet speaks in the name of the Lord, if the word does not come to pass or come true, that is a word which the Lord has not spoken. The prophet has spoken it presumptuously. You need not be afraid of him. So here we have Jesus claiming to be God, speaking in the name of the Lord, which he's supposed to be, but it didn't come to pass and didn't come true. So by the Bible's own standard, we should not fear or listen to Jesus. So again, this is a showstopper for me. I think it's a major defeater among others for Christianity. Again, I go into full detail about this, rationalizations and so forth in the debate I had with G-Man, available on my channel. So if you want more about this, check it out. Next argument. The argument from confusion. There's just so many different views in Christianity. You think God would make his perfect word clearer. Look at the different ranges we have in Christianity. We have all the way from hyper-Calvinism to all the way down to open theism and universalism. Open theism asserts that God is powerful and knowing, but he's not all knowing. He doesn't know what the future is. So it kind of solves the problem of kind of problems of problem of suffering and stuff like that, where not even God knows the future. You might have a good idea, since he knows a lot, but you have that compared to hyper Calvinism, where God controls everything down to the roll of a dice. So he knows everything that's going to take place, plus he foreordained everything. So not only does he know it, but he willed it to happen. So you have all these ranges and all the different viewpoints in between. You'll have debates between Calvinists and Arminians. You'll have debates between hyper Calvinists and moderate Calvinists. You think if it actually came from God, and he wants to fully communicate his revelation with humans, there wouldn't be these problems. You think of 1 Corinthians 14:33, where it says, "For God is not a God of confusion, but of peace, as in all the churches of the saints." Well, it seems to be the God of confusion to me. In John 16:13, we read, "When the Spirit of truth comes, he will guide you into all the truth. For he will not speak on his own authority, but whatever he hears, he will speak, and he will declare to you the things that are to come." Well, like what? Like Jesus' second coming, which failed. So you can see, special revelation is not matching general revelation, which was my very first argument in part 1. What would convince me? I think this is a very important question that everyone should ask themselves. Skeptic, Christian, whomever. When you don't believe in a position, ask yourself, what would convince you? If your answer is nothing would convince you, then I think you're being closed-minded and you're not willing to look at the issue in an honest, intellectual manner. So you should have criteria. You should have a criteria. What would change your mind? What would convince you? Again, if you don't have one, I don't think you're being honest, and maybe you haven't thought of it. Well, I think you should think about it more. Research it more. Try to come up with reasons that would convince you to change your mind. So what are my reasons, or not my reason, but what would change my mind? Well, first, if there was better evidence for the fantastical events in the Bible. A great example is in 1 Kings 18:20-45. You have a contest between Elijah and the prophets of Baal. They have a contest where they set wood on fire from through supernatural intervention. And then Elijah wins this contest, and he kills all the prophets of Baal. But this is an evidential contest. It's like, let me prove to you with a clear demonstration that my religion is true. It's an evidential approach to apologetics, so to speak, rather than a presuppositional approach. So if you can do a demonstration like 1 Kings 18, that would be a good step to convince me. A question that you have to ask yourself is, why is it that principles of math, science, and logic are shared around the world, but not religion? 2 + 2 = 4 is the same all over the world. It doesn't matter where you come from, what race, ethnicity, culture, religion you are. Principles of math, science, and logic, they're the same. Why isn't that the same for religion? Why isn't everyone on the same boat? If that was the same, that would convince me. So what I'm seeing is that people's cultural religion, their cultural relativism, is something that they're declaring to be absolute truth. well, I'm seeing different cultures with different views, and fundamentalists claim their cultural relativism as absolute truth. But you know, again, it should be like math, science, and logic if it was absolute truth. What else? That the Christian God would be empirically evident to everyone, like they were to Adam and Eve. In the Adam and Eve story, he walked and talked with Adam and Eve. Adam and Eve didn't question the existence of God. Yeah, they had a personal relationship with God. Some Christians claim to have a personal relationship with God today. Like Ray Comfort, for example, he claimed that he knew God better than his own wife. Oh, really? I'd like to see him demonstrate that. A personal relationship is a two-way conversation. Now, are you just having a conversation in your head and imagining what Jesus would say or God would say? Are you really getting any feedback from him, or is this coming from your conscious? Um, so there was a verse in the Old Testament where God uh, talked to the whole nation of Israel. Imagine, like, God giving a State of the Universe address, like the President of the United States gives a State of the Union address, in Congress. Wouldn't it be great if God could give a State of the Universe address to all of mankind? Maybe once a year. That'd be great. If that happened since the beginning of humanity, no one would question if God exists. It'd be very simple. What else? If you could convince me the Bible God is a loving God who cares about his creation. This goes back to the problem of suffering, the problem of evil. In Psalm 145, 8 through 9, we read, "The Lord is gracious and merciful, slow to anger and abound in steadfast love. The Lord is all good, and his compassion is over all that he has made." Do we see that? No, 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 we don't see that at all. We see suffering and death and, and lots of it, even before humans became on the scene. So again, this is back to the problem of evil. Next, if Christians would live up to Bible claims, for example, in John 14:12, we read, "Truly, truly, I say to you, he who believes in me will also do the works that I do, and greater works than these he will do, because I go to the Father." So if Christians could really do great works or greater works in Jesus, well, that would convince me. But do we have that? No, we have con artists like Benny Hinn and other charlatans, doing tricks to create their miracles, which a lot of Christians don't even believe. Mark 16:18, they will pick up servants, and if they drink anything deadly, it will not hurt them. They will lay their hands on the sick, and they will recover. Of course, Mark 16 past verse 8 is a interpolation. It was added on later. That's usually, if I bring this up, they'll say, "Oh, well, that it was added on later." Well, why is it even in the Bible then? This is just one long ending. There's actually, in some manuscripts, a different long ending, but most scholars will say that chapter 16 stops at verse 8. So they can say, well, okay, well, then we exclude this. Well, it's in the King James Bible. Why is that in there? So I'm not allowed to use this? Okay, it's strange. Well, a Christian wrote it. So about Mark 11:23, "Truly I say to you, whoever says to this mountain, be taken up and cast into the sea, and does not doubt in his heart, but believes that what he says will come to pass, it will be done for him." So, okay, if Christians were able to do something like this, then that would certainly make me pause and question my worldview. Oh, well, perhaps they had doubt in his heart. Well, I guess a lot of Christians have doubt in their hearts then. So I guess we can't use this then. What about Mark 18, 19 through 20? Again, I said to you, if two of you agree on earth about anything they ask, it will be done for them by my Father in heaven. For where two or three are gathered in my name, there I am in the midst of them. Well, it'd be great to see if this could work. Could you do that for the COVID virus, please? Um, again, these are things that we could verify. Some things we could falsify, I would hope. If we can't falsify them, then I don't know, what good are these verses then? Um, Next, if we could tour heaven, if we could tour heaven. In 2 Corinthians 12 through 22, we read, this is Paul supposedly writing, I know a man in Christ who's 14 years ago was caught up to the third heaven, whether it be in body or out of body, I don't know, God knows. So wouldn't it be great if we could experience that? A lot of scholars believe Paul's talking about himself here, that Paul was taken up to the third heaven. Boy, wouldn't it be great if we could tour heaven? We could just check it out. That would certainly open my eyes. Hey, there's more to reality than just this physical universe that we're in. Happened to Paul. Why can't it happen to anyone else? Well, I guess God decided not to regenerate me and keep me in my totally depraved state. Would answer the Calvinists, I guess. But has this happened besides anyone except for Paul? Well, Elijah and Moses apparently were taken up to heaven. So, again, what would convince me? This is one. I think this is a good one. The effects of the fall were reversed by accepting Christianity. Imagine if you become a Christian and all the ill effects that came with the fall of Adam and Eve were reversed for just those Christians. So for Christian mothers, for example, they wouldn't have painful childbirth. And on properties owned by Christians, there'd be no thorns and thistles. They wouldn't have to work. They wouldn't have to labor as hard. If we could see that, boy, Christians have something going here. Christians seem to be doing a lot better in life than I am. Maybe I should check them out. Maybe they're doing better than me. What's their secret? Maybe check that out. And again, it's on the same thread. If Christians were more successful in life than non-Christians, if Christians were happier, they were more prosperous, they flourished more. Yeah, they have the secret to great living. I better check them out. In fact, in my college years, I befriended a Church of Christ minister, and I was impressed about his character. And his dedication and so forth. That inspired me to take a second look at Christianity at that time, because I had my doubts. And we did Bible studies together, and I really enjoyed the Bible studies we had. I actually went to his church, and I met the people there, nice people, but they didn't have the same character as he did. After going there, I realized that people are people, no matter where you go, and the same difficulties, hardships, and so forth, like everyone else. But if overall, I saw that Christians were just living longer, were happier, they're just more successful at their jobs and so forth. They have the secret to life, right? That would help convince me. And here's another one. If regenerated Calvinists were actually created as new creatures, not only to believe in Calvinist doctrines, but to no longer sin as well. It's strange that we read in the New Testament that God will make you born again. Will change your nature. Will make you a new creature. Well, what that seems to do is it just makes you accept Christian doctrine. doesn't necessarily make you any less of a sinner. But again, if I actually saw a new creation, a new creatures in these born again Christians, that they were radically changed and they consistently stayed so, that would be good evidence for me that, hey, they have something going here. What I commonly see is with converted Christians is when they first are converted, they go through a honeymoon stage where they're in love with Christ, and they love the church, and they're dedicated, and they're convinced, and nothing's going to change their mind, and they spend hours on Bible studies and apologetics and stuff, and you can just see the passion and fire in their eyes. They're really committed, and over the years, the honeymoon phase dies out, um, and sometimes they fall back into their sinful ways, which, I mean, to be expected. Christians will say, oh, we're not perfect, but we're forgiven. Okay, well, yeah, that might be the case, but are you really a new creation in Christ as far as your character? Is it just that you're trying harder now, and you have a divine judge looking over your shoulder more, where before you didn't really consider that more? Um, uh, you know, so is it really through your, what is making you sin less? Is it your human effort doing it, or did God actually change you? According to Calvinists, God does it all, right? He gives you irresistible grace, and you have no power to do so. You're totally depraved. So it's not in your power to change. It's all up to God. So are these born again Calvinists? Are they really new creatures? They never sin? I think not. And here's a big one. Show me that all my academic knowledge about Christianity that critical scholars assert that contradicts Christian dogma was wrong. So, I offer a lot of debates. I point out what scholars say about the Bible, all the contradictions, about the forgeries, the historical and scientific inaccuracies, so forth, all the criticisms of the Bible. I mentioned, about how writers and Christians take Old Testament prophecies out of context and so forth. And if you can show me all my views of the Bible, which I learned from critical scholars is wrong, then that would be a good step in leading me back to Christianity. Try to make me a young Earth creationist. Something on that level. And show me how all my views on the Bible that I hold critically is actually wrong. And not only are you going to have to do that to me, you're going to have to convince all these PhD scholars that I agree with as well. And that's a very tall task. Okay, next. Christianity no longer shapes my world. Again, this is why I'm not a Christian. Well, if Christianity really isn't informing me of the world, it's not helping me make sense of the world, then that's a good reason why you shouldn't call yourself a Christian. And why is that? We have better naturalistic explanations that are predictable and falsifiable. We do not need the God of the gaps to offer explanations for what we do not know. In fact, God of the gaps arguments, you'll hear from like presuppositionalists that, we can account for this, we can account for that, and atheists can't. Well, they have a just so story, and that's what religion does. It tells you through their ideological stories of why things are the way they are. The problem is that it gets in the way of us finding better answers and truer answers. If we think, oh, well, what created all the diversity in life? Oh, well, God did so. We read it in Genesis 1 and 2. If we just accept those, then we wouldn't find better explanations like the theory of evolution and so forth. So Christianity is getting in the way of human progress, really. So and think, when has a supernatural explanation ever superseded a natural one? Never. We've had scientific theories replace other scientific theories when more evidence came about. For example, we have Einstein's theory of general relativity replacing Newton's theory of gravity. But that's still a naturalistic explanation or a scientific explanation replacing another one. We never had a supernatural explanation ever supersede a natural one. Only if you deny scientific and historical facts, Christianity offers stories that make sense in the world. So, yeah, if you want to deny evolution and deny science and so forth, only then can some of these stories make sense. And that's why a lot of young Earth creationists reject evolution, because it screws up their paradigm. It screws up their paradigm of death came in the world because of Adam's sin. If death existed before Adam's sin, it just throws off their theology. So that's why they have to deny it. But I'm convinced evolution is true. I'm convinced of an old Earth and so forth. So Christianity does not make sense of the world to me. You have to go back and be a young Earth creationist. I think you have to go farther. I think you have to be a flat earther if you're going to understand the Bible and listen to its origin stories. Christianity doesn't make sense to me. It raises more questions than it answers. So, for the reasons I just gave. All right, I'm no longer a Christian. Well, what do I believe? Right now I have a humanistic, secular worldview. So what does that mean? What does that entail? Because there is no God to help us, we must rely on ourselves. So there is no higher, easy button to resort to. If you want cures for cancer, political problems, how to govern ourselves and so forth, we must figure that out, because no God is going to help us. If you want to cure, if you want to get through this COVID crisis, we must work together and solve problems ourselves. Cures for diseases and so forth. Doctors are doing serious research. They're working hard to do this, because no God's helping us. We have to do it ourselves if you want a better world. So I say it to everyone, even myself. Don't be lazy. If you want the world to be a better place, we have to make the effort. We have to make the human effort to do that. There's no substitution. Morality. What's my morality based on? My morality is based on the well-being of sentient creatures, not pleasing some divine dictator and reward and punishment from this dictator. With that, authoritarianism and tribalism must end. We're more global than ever now. We have to, get rid of this tribalistic mindset that we have. That's part of our evolutionary history. Authoritarianism, we must reject that. We see that in the current political climate. We should not accept authority for authority's sake. They're there for us. We're not there for authority. Again, why? Because our morality is based on our well-being, not the glorification of some dictator. And this is the principles that I'm in the United States. This is the principles that the United States was founded on. A good example is John Adams. where he writes, government is instituted for the common good, for the protection, safety, prosperity, and the happiness of the people, and not for profit, honor, or private interest of any one man, family, or class of men. Therefore, the people alone have the uncontestable, unalienable, and undefeasible right to institute government and to reform, alter, or change the same when the protection, safety, and prosperity and happiness require it. So we do not accept authority for authority's sake. If authority is not working for the common good, we should reject that authority, which is quite different from what the Bible suggests. In Romans 13:1, we read, "Let every person be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and those that exist have been instituted by God." Former Attorney General Jeff Sessions asserted this verse to justify the separation of immigrant children from their parents down in Texas, which is still going on, by the way. So he's basically saying, we're the authority. Why can we do this? Because God says so. Very dangerous, a very dangerous viewpoint to have, that you should just blindly accept authority. Again, authority is there for the common good. We're not here for the authority itself. Methodological naturalism works. I'm essentially, lean on naturalism. Could there be a supernatural? Could there be a super duper natural? Could there be a subnatural? Could there be parts reality I knew nothing about? Yes, I'm open to that. But we're not aware of it. We can't work with it. So we just have to stick with what we can operate with, which is with his methodological naturalism. With it, we have made great advances in industry, medicine, agriculture, and many other fields. Again, what can we do with supernaturalism? Think not of Socrates, but think of the truth. Again, this goes back to authority. The truth abides in propositions and ideas, not in men or not in persons. So despite lip service for truth and love, Christianity puts idol worship, the Bible being one, and theological doctrine above love and truth. That's my view. All right, so this again, I quoted from Ken Daniels before in his book, Why I Believe, Reflections of a Former Missionary. Again, this book is free on the internet. You can read it online. But you can also buy it on Amazon at a very cheap price. But I found it very informative, and this was a dedicated missionary who went to like African countries and translated the Bible into their foreign, in their native tongues, so they could be converted. So again, as one of the books I recommended along this series. So he writes, though there is no longer an ultimate meaning to life, there remain multiple meanings in life. I can still bask in the love of my wife and children, find satisfaction in my computer programming work, enjoy taking our dog on walks, watch a good movie, read intellectual stimulating books and discuss them with friends, play a game of chess with my sons, coach my daughter's soccer team, tickle my children half to death, contribute time and financial support to charitable causes, and savor a handful or two of roasted, salted sunflower seeds. I may not retain this optimistic picture of life if a crippling disease befalls me. If a crippling disaster befalls me, but I can only take one day at a time. I think that's good advice. In fact, we actually see this advice in the Bible, and this is where I'm going to end. So in Ecclesiastes 9, 4 through 10, we read something similar. This is one of my favorite books in the Bible. In fact, some like pastors and theologians will say, "Oh, well, this is how an atheist would view the world. So we shouldn't view the world this way." But an atheist, this is just to show how an atheist would view it. That's an interesting interpretation of the book. Funny why they put it in the Bible at all, if it offers an atheistic perspective. But anyway, it states, "But he who is joined with all the living has hope. For a living dog is better than a dead lion. For the living know that they will die, but the dead know nothing, and they have no more reward, but the memory of them is lost. Their love and their hate and their envy are already perished, and they have no more for ever any share in all that is done under the sun. Go, eat your bread with enjoyment, and drink your wine with a merry heart, for God has already approved what you do. Let your garments be always white. Let not oil be lacking on your head. Enjoy life with the wife whom you love, all the days of your vain life, which he has given you under the sun, because that is your portion in life, and in your toil at which you toil under the sun. Whatever your hand finds to do, do it with your might, for there is no work or thought or knowledge or wisdom in Sheol, to which you are going." So, so what is he saying here? While you're alive, enjoy life. Life is precious. Why? Because it's going to end. If life was abundant, then it wouldn't be precious. What is precious is what is rare, right? Is what we have a limited amount of, and there's nothing more limited than our lives. So it's up to us to live it fully, to the best of our ability, to live a life well lived. Because eventually, it will come to an end. All good movies come to an end, and unfortunately, it can't go forever. So I'll leave it at that. So that is my as the end of my series on why I'm not a Christian. If I have some time now, I will turn to the side chat, and I'll answer any questions or read any relevant comments that you might have for me. And if there aren't, then I'll just end it. So let me see. Let me see. See. Okay. Okay. Not seeing any questions. All right. Well, let me check. Let me go to the live feed real quick. 14 people watching. Okay. Let me see. Okay, there's one here. Floyd, the most interesting retort to your story you have received from apologists is. I'm waiting for it, actually. This is a part of the reason why I'm doing this. I'd like to hear responses from apologists and Christians saying, "Hey, Floyd, I saw your presentation on why you're not a Christian, and I want to talk to you about a couple of the issues that you brought up." I'd like that. I did have a back and forth with a Catholic on the meaning of life, the purpose of life. If atheism's true, if there's no afterlife, that that our lives are ultimately meaningless, um, and so forth. I had a back and forth with him quite a bit on that, and I pointed out that what they mean by ultimate is everlasting. They're saying life is not worth living unless unless it never ends, because anything you do, it doesn't matter what you do, well, it's going to be meaningless a billion years from now, right? When there are no more humans, or I'm not I forget how long they predict the Earth and our solar system will last, but after that time, it doesn't matter what you do, right? It'll all be meaningless then. Well, that's true. That is true. But it doesn't mean it's meaningless now. Dan Barker had a great quote. He said, we don't have a purpose-driven life, but we have life-driven purpose. Our lives, our life, our nature, and the world we find ourselves in give us those purposes. Why do we go to work? Why do we do anything? It's for human flourishing, right? It's for our well-being. That gives us purpose. Will it come to an end? Sure, it will come to the end, but that doesn't mean that there's not meaning and purpose right now. What you're saying is, I don't want to die. I mean, that's really what they're saying. I want to live forever. Well, a lot of people feel that way, but if it's not the case, it's not the case. It's a fallacy of dire consequences. Um, so, life is precious. Live it the best you can. Let me see. Floyd, can you give an example of an issue where you strongly disagree with Alex Malpass? See, the problem with professional philosophers like Alex Malpass, I should say, academic ones, secular ones, is they don't commit that much to metaphysical positions. I notice they're very careful in their phrasing and their language and their arguments. They won't overcommit or commit a lot to metaphysical positions, and I think the reason why that is because they're aware of the problems of that. They know all the arguments for and against these positions. They're aware of the problems, and all these philosophical positions, have problems. That's why there's always viewpoints, right? If everything was solved, there would only be one metaphysical position. But we don't say that at all. So, Alex Malpass really doesn't reveal too much his metaphysical positions, and even said so that he's not going to take a lot of positions on these things because he's aware of all the problems. He knows a lot more about the difficulties of these problems, than I ever would. But I can't say. I don't know offhand where we disagree a whole lot, because again, he doesn't reveal a whole lot to his viewpoints on on these things. Let me see. Hi, Floyd. Has anyone proved God ever? Well, yeah. I mean, you have to define what God we're talking about. In this series, I'm just attacking the Christian God, right? I think the best you can do about I think you can do about proving that there's a God is showing that it is necessary to start with a mind. Now, this mind could be an evil God. It could be a deistic God who's very indifferent about the world. But I think what the theists would really need to focus on is that you have to start with a mind. A mind is necessary to create the universe, for example. I think that is the real issue with the great debate with theism versus atheism. That must we start with the mind? If you can show that, then I think you're on your way to proving God. But I had a recent talk with Randall Rouser. It was on the rage of whether the Christian God was an all-loving and good God, and he gave his definition of God being the greatest being ever to be conceived, that he's morally perfect and so forth. And my view is, well, perhaps that God could exist, but the Christian God does not fit that bill. So in our list of potential candidates of God, I think we need to cross off the Christian God off that list. It just, the Christian God does not match what his definition of God is. There's a saying by Blaise Pascal, who gave us his famous Pascal's wager, where he says the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob is not the God of the philosophers. He's not the God of Anselm, Augustine, and Aquinas. And I think that's very true. So, is there a mind out there? Well, I don't rule that out. Again, I don't see it necessary. You have to find a convincing argument for me that's necessary. But that's the way to go. Offer some sort of transcendental argument, against atheistic worldviews like naturalism, physicalism, even Platonism, and so forth. So and again, you can't say, oh well, account for this. No, that's an appeal to ignorance. You have to show that it's impossible. That granted those things, that it's possible. It's metaphysically impossible. That if naturalism is true, then there's no way that X can be the case, and you accept X. I accept X exists, but under naturalism or whatever, it is impossible for it to happen. That is what a true transcendental argument is supposed to show, and that's a good step. A common argument I'm seeing a lot lately is the argument from reason, first popularized by C.S. Lewis, which claims that if naturalism is true, that we can't trust our reasoning, that reasoning is impossible. I'm actually working on a fourth, it's a preview of what's to come. I'm working on a fourth part of my criticism of presuppositionalism, and I'm going to talk about this argument from reason. Alvin Plantinga has a similar argument called the evolutionary argument against naturalism. I noticed that's becoming popular argument against atheists. So I'm going to do a presentation on that, as well as other points critiquing presuppositionalism. Let me see. Hi, Floyd. Why Calvinists have many wills in God? At last, the future in Calvinism is known by God, right? Let me say, why Calvinists have many wills in God? I'm not sure by many wills in God. You're talking about like the creative will or permissive will, or I'm not sure what you mean. At last, the future in Calvinism is known by God, right? Well, yeah, in Calvinism, not only does God know the future, but he designed the future. He foreordained the future. He predetermined the future before the foundations of the earth. He is, if reality is a movie, God is the writer. He's the playwright. He's the director. He's the producer. He's all the functions of behind the scenes. He even controls our will. He controls the will of us as well. And yet Calvinists claim that we have free will as well. That's a big problem with Calvinistic theology. It's the divine sovereignty versus human free will. Because moderate Calvinists claim that we have free will. They don't believe in libertarian free will. It's more a compatibilist version of free will. But they hold to human free will So we're still responsible for our sinful ways, but yet God gives us our will. If you want to learn more about this, I gave a presentation on Calvinism. It was on the Scholars Fiction Show. It is mirrored on my channel. So if you want to learn about Calvinism, you can watch that presentation. Again, it's on Scholar Fictions and it's all mirrored on mine. I'm actually would like to looking for a debate uh, uh, against the Calvinists. I want to debate them over the problem of divine sovereignty versus free will. It's a big problem in Calvinism, which they acknowledge. And watch my presentation on Calvinism, and you'll see how the Calvinists admit that it's a huge problem, but they still think their theology is systematic and coherent. All right, what else? Sydney says, do you mean a mind that exists before existence? Well, if a mind exists, there's nothing, if it exists, it can't be before existence, because, if a mind exists, that's part of existence. That raises a question. If God lives outside of time, can he have a thought? Can God have a sequential thought at all? Some theologians say that God doesn't even infer things, and that he has no propositional knowledge. Well, can we think of God as a person? Yeah, I guess that's something also to mention. Theism to me is the belief in not only a disembodied mind, but as a mind, God is a person, right? He's not a concept. He's not some abstract thought. He has personhood. And and to have a mind, you have consciousness, right? You have personhood. And with that, we usually think, well, this to have consciousness, you have thoughts and so forth. So it raises a lot of problems. Theologians will say, oh, that's just analogical language. Well, then what does it mean to be made in God's image? So this whole concept of God can be incoherent at times. So, all right. So it's a little over an hour again now. I think that's it for the questions. So, okay, great. I hope you enjoyed the series. Again, look for part 4 on my critique of presuppositionalism coming up. I'm going to tackle the argument from reason. I recommend reading up on it. C.S. Lewis made it popular, and it's used by apologists a lot ever since. Frank Turek uses it. Alan Plantinga, Matt Slick uses it. William Lane Craig has used it. I see it brought up all the time. So go check it out, and hopefully I'll have that part 4 ready to go in a few weeks. I'm still putting together my slides for it, but it should be good. I'm also going to cover some other philosophical problems and debate tactics that presuppositionalists use. I know a lot of people like my presuppositionalist videos, so look forward to that. Also, I have a few PowerPoint presentations I have ready, finished, of debates that I thought I was going to do, but the debates never happened. So I have at least 2 presentations just sitting there collecting dust right now. I might just present them myself without a debate opponent, because I put a lot of time and effort into these presentations, and I'd rather show them than have no one see them. One is on Daniel 9, which I've done already, but this is kind of a expanded support of my views on Daniel 9. And also, I have a part 2 on Calvinism. I was supposed to debate a Calvinist, who saw my first presentation, and that never happened. So might hold. I'll see if a Calvinist approaches me, but if not, I'll present that on my own, either on my channel or anyone that wants to host my presentations. I welcome, because I have a low number of subscribers. I'd rather do it on a more popular YouTube show where there's more of an audience. The larger audience I can reach, the better. I'm not. I don't do this to make money. This is not a financial venture of mine. I just enjoy it. This is like a hobby of mine, so to speak. I love to share my knowledge. I don't have a Patreon. I don't plan any of that. I just do this because I get frustrated, and I think a lot of apologists are dishonest. They will present an argument, and they'll only show their side of the argument when there's been plenty of rebuttals of it, and they hide that from their flock. If you're going to be honest in this, when there's an argument, you should know both sides. You should know your side and their side. You should know the rebuttals of it. You should be aware of the problems on your side as well as the problems on their side, and be open about it. If we're to advance, make progress, we should be honest and know both sides. Don't hide facts from the audience. Get all the information out there. Your strong points over your weak points and everything. That's how we move forward. But we just have, again, too much tribalism. Too many people just trying to win the argument to look good. Trying to score debate points to boost their ego. And feel good about themselves. We need to get past that sort of egotistical mindset, and we do it for the common good, and try to learn truth. So, anything else? Can I add you to the atheist page on my website? Yeah, sure. I'll take any any advertising, any promotion. Sure. Again, if anyone wants to talk to me about any of these issues privately or publicly in a debate format, on a YouTube show or whatever, reach out to me. I gave you my contact information. I'd love to talk to you about it. I enjoy talking about this. This is fun to me. This is what I do, in my spare time. I love the intellectual challenge. So okay. With that, I end the broadcast. So take care.